How's it going?
Hey Jonathan, how you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, man?
All right, can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Yeah, you sound super smooth. Probably way better than
Cool.
me.
No, you sound fine. Thank you for the invite, by the way.
Oh yeah,
Very
I
nice of
hear
you.
I hear such great things about you from like everybody. I know we've got a lot of crossover in our audience, and like I literally have never heard anybody say anything negative about you. So I
Oh,
figured
that's nice.
Yeah, I figured
Yeah,
we
that's
could
nice.
get a little chat in. Really, yeah, I haven't. It's kind of interesting because sometimes I like to do like a ton of research and like get to know you guys beforehand. For you,
Hmm.
like I kind of know a little bit about you, but I really wanted to kind of get to know your philosophies and stuff, just kind of
Yeah.
kind of real time.
I always find it's a tricky one. Like I used to do a lot of podcasts too and interviews, and it's difficult to know how much to research versus how much to be organic. So yeah, I mean, let's just start it and see how the conversation goes.
Yeah, it always depends. Like if I have someone like where I'm really trying to hit some specific stuff and I know the background, I want to like really show it what they know. But for you, I think like so many people just love your personality too. So I just want to get that
Yeah.
out there. So just tell me a little bit about your background. You're in the UK, right?
Yeah, UK. So England,
Okay.
in the Midlands in the UK. Um, Yeah, so I've been training for about 26 years, 44 this year. Competed for 18 years. Haven't
Now,
competed for a few years, but I
that was
did
powerlifting
powerlifting.
and bodybuilding? Okay.
Yeah, powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman as well.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I
Cool.
also did a very niche sport called, well, it was grip competitions. It
Oh,
was kind of
okay.
an offshoot of strongman, and that was fun. It was cool. But yeah, generally I tell people I did three different sports,
Did you have
and
many
I've coached for
injuries
11 years.
from the strongman? Because that's so like hardcore.
Strongman, I needed twice, so
Yeah.
not much. But you know what? I was quite lucky. I think I didn't have any major lasting injuries from my sports. The only major injury I had was from a biking accident, which was a few years ago. But no, I was pretty lucky with that kind of stuff. I think what led me to retire was just general feeling beat up and not really enjoying the training anymore. And also, I'd hit some pretty big milestones, and at a certain point, it just wasn't worth the pain, you
Yeah.
know. So it's like it was 14 years of it of just loving strength. I was all into it. I think quite a lot of guys they like strength, but they like the physique aspect, and I just love strength. 14 years just single-minded into it, and it got to the point where I just felt beat up. I didn't like training anymore, so I quit. But yeah, no, thankfully, no major injuries from that.
What were your numbers that you put up in powerlifting?
So I competed across the 82 kilo category, so like 180s, 200 pounds, 220. My best lifts were at 200. They were 400 pound bench, so 180 bench, 255 squat, and 300 kilo deadlift, which
Oh,
is like
wow.
660.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
not bad. I mean,
are you lifetime
wouldn't,
natty?
yeah, yeah, lifetime natty.
Oh,
Wouldn't
wow.
get you very far on the national stage now,
Yeah.
because the standards have gone a
Yeah,
lot,
it's kind of crazy.
broader.
Yeah.
But back in like 2010, it was pretty decent standard, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've never pulled that at all. The other ones I've kind of touched a little bit, but I'm not a lifetime natty. But powerlifting wasn't my forte. What did you have more like passion for out of the three? I mean, I'm assuming it wasn't the strongman, since you only did it twice, but between bodybuilding and powerlifting.
Yeah, strongman was the first competition I ever did. It was back in 2000. It was like April 2000. I've been training for like 6 months. It was a gym put it on. But since then, the UK have done really well with strongman. We have a network of influential people in the north, the Midlands, and the south who kind of run everything. So that's why you see so many Brits on the UK on the world's strongest man
Yeah.
scene. So the next competition I did was in 2012. That was kind of like peak strength, and it was fun, but I just wasn't in any good shape for that at all. Like you have to have a really good engine, you have to be
Yeah.
agile, and it's a lot more challenging than powerlifts, which are basically just straight up and down. I'm not an athlete, it was I was a lifter, right? No, I wasn't, but strongman is more like a real sport. It's like
Yeah.
tennis or basketball. It's that you need actual athleticism. But no, I just did the powerlift, so I did most of my lifting in powerlifting.
Did you like the powerlifting better than the bodybuilding? You were competing in both at the same time?
You know what? I think once I loved it at the time, but I think once I retired, I kind of lost my way for a few years. I was mostly just coaching at the time, and I wasn't really enjoying my own training. And then when I competed in bodybuilding again in 2018, I realized that perhaps the thing that I loved about powerlifting was actually just a competition, and
Oh.
it wasn't necessarily the sport. I love competing. I love going up against somebody else, man to man, and seeing who comes out the best. I love that aspect of it. So bodybuilding provided that, but just in a way which was a bit better for my body at the time because I was 38 years old when I competed then.
Okay, so that was your first competition was after you had stopped powerlifting?
Yeah, yeah, like 4 years afterwards. So it was good. I think I was probably about my biggest about then.
What'd you
Yeah.
compete at?
It was men's physique, unfortunately.
Well,
I
yeah, I mean, you're natty in the UK. Yeah, how'd you do?
I was all right. I came second in the field of like seven, narrowly beaten by the guy who came before me. He deserved it though. He did really well. He had a great physique too, nice and broad and everything. I think I probably outmuscled him, but I think he was just his structure was better and he was leaner on the day. So yeah, it was the first time I gotten really, really lean, and it was a challenge for me. I was quite a big fat powerlifter
W-
back in my day.
Was that like an untested org or was that like in a natural organization?
The federation is both tested and untested. It's a PCA in the
Yeah.
UK. You've probably heard of it. It's quite a big one.
Yeah,
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 yeah. So they have different competitions. So yeah, it was cool. I opted not to go for the first time because I went straight to men's physique
yeah.
just because I thought, why not? Let's go for it. It was fun. It was good. I prior to the day, I didn't think I was going to do very well. You get that sort of insecurity about
Yeah.
yourself. So and I saw the other lads and I thought they looked great. But yeah, no, it went all right. I was happy with it.
It's funny. A lot of us are like the opposite. Like a lot of people like the stage and the competition's the thing we fucking hate. Like that's the last thing I like. Is like I fucking don't like beating people. They feel bad. I don't want to fucking lose. It's like I hate
I,
fucking.
s- I saw your pictures. You look fantastic. So, how many competitions have you done?
Oh, thanks. I did physique when there was no classic. I would have done classic. That was what I wanted,
Mm,
but there wasn't that. So I
yeah.
did two physique shows. I won my first one, and then they brought in classic, and I did the very first classic pro qualifier. I got fourth. The top two turned pro, so I was close. I did another classic show, and then I outgrew it, and I've done four bodybuilding shows. I won two. I got fourth in my last pro qualifier. So I think I'm kind of done probably for now. It's like nowadays people talk about how it's so easy to turn pro, and that is true if you've got like insane genetics. You can have the crazy genetics and not really have to get in that good a shape, or maybe not do that much
Yeah.
drugs, or you have to have a ton of free time and be able to dedicate it 100%, which I don't with my business and my kids. Or you got to be able to really, you got to be willing to really ramp up the drugs or have some kind of combination. So it's like I don't have any of those, so it's going to be hard for me
Right.
at this point. But yeah, I really appreciate it. But yeah, one thing that I'm gonna like is
I
kind
think
of
that's a very rational take. Like,
yeah.
I think a lot of people would have really gone for it, if they were that close. But yeah, dude, your pictures look fantastic. So, just you're done with it now. You're going to compete again, like more
I
kind of
I
stuff.
might do masters this year USA's, but if not, I'll wait till I'm 40 because I'm 37. I'll be 38 this year. A couple years, I have a pretty good shot at turning pro at 40 without even having to like kill myself. So, but
That'd be
so
awesome, man. Yeah.
are you pretty into like the pro bodybuilding scene, the scene in the UK when you were
Uh,
coming up?
Yeah, kind of, kind of. I mean, I take an interest in it. I take an interest in the big competitions, and I know some of the personalities around here. Like, it's a very close-knit community. The guys I was coming up with in 2010, they're all coaches now. They're all kind of like fairly high-level coaches and doing their thing. So, yeah, I like to keep in touch with things, but not massively so. I keep in touch with the big shows, but that's about it.
Do you kind of have the same philosophy of training that I think like most of the UK guys do, the kind of down and dirty and working hard kind of in the dungeon?
Kind of, yeah, kind of. I think when I was coming up, that was my philosophy. So if we're talking very early on, that's how I was taught. So I was taught from the guys where I live, where I sort of live and I was grew up, is about an hour away from Dorian Yates' Temple Gym. So it was kind of weird in the 90s because as as much as we love Dorian now, like it was insanely more intense back in the day. So all the gyms around the Midlands where I grew up, they were all basically equipped, suited for Dorian's training. And so the lads from our gym would go and train at Dorian's gym, and Dorian would come and train at somebody else's gym, and it was like a big network of just casual friends who would all train together. I was coached by those guys who came up with Dorian. So my style of early training was that hit style training where the set doesn't end when you've hit failure. The set ends when you failed. Then you've had three forced reps, three negative reps, and then depending on how much your partner hates you on that day, you may be forced and kept in the seat until you're ready to go. So it was pretty brutal training, but I think that got me only so far, and then afterwards I had to introduce more volume. So over the course of my lifetime, I've done super high volumes. I To get my first three-plate bench, I had to do something like 25 sets of pressing per week. So I really had to ramp it up. The bench, as you know, kind of responds very well to volume and practice. So yeah, I've kind of run the gamut of high volume, low volume, but my roots are definitely low volume stuff with these guys. But I kind of rebelled against that because it just didn't work for me. I'd hit something like a 200-pound bench and I'd plateaued with low volumes, and everyone said, "Look, you're maxed out, you're tapped out," and I just wouldn't accept that at 18. So I learned. I went online. Thankfully, forums were up at that time. People were talking, and I could learn. And yeah, I got some more information, and I moved more to high volume for a while. So I've kind of run the gamut, definitely with my yeah, over the years. I've done a lot of them. Yeah, high and low.
You have to, right, to be able to have like real input and know what's going on. But do you think there's a difference, like if you're on gear, do you think that makes a difference with the low volume and the intensity levels? I'm just curious.
I've not seen it so much on gear. What I have seen is different body types. So, um, as a broad general rule, like just larger, thicker, broader types with the kind of thick waist, the sort of the Yates, the typical Yates type of just
Yeah.
big, tall, wide,
Like a wide
thick joint
ISA for people that are
individuals.
watching my shit. Yeah.
Say again?
It'd be like a wide ISA for people that know my terms. Yeah.
Oh,
Like
I see. Okay,
big rib cage. Yeah, just throwing it out there.
yeah, yeah, right. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. Yeah, so that they tend to do better with the low volumes, from my experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably because the joints can, connective tissues can withstand the stress of the higher weights and the lower volumes, the more intense work. From what I find with myself, because I'm lighter boned, like my waist goes to this when I'm in shape. Um, I think I people like me tend to do better with high volumes with slightly less weight and less intensity, less beating your head against the wall with failure training. So whereas somebody, a thick jointed guy, like a big sort of Scandinavian Icelandic dude, might do well with a one set approach to failure or top set, back off set. Somebody like myself, I might do 3 or 4 sets with the same weight, perhaps doing set to cross. So there's a progressive RAR, maybe 3 RAR, 2 1 0 kind of thing. I tend to respond better to that kind of thing. It seems to give me better work and it doesn't beat up my joints. So not so much the drug angle, but more body types. So again, that typical kind of like large, tall Viking type of person tend to do quite well in my experience with the low volume approach. Probably could do as well, probably does well with both. The guys who are potentially less genetically gifted, maybe more kind of naturally scrawny, smaller bone structures, all that kind of thing, which is me, tend to do better with high volumes with more RAR type approach. This is just what I've seen.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm just thinking through my lens. That actually kind of makes sense from what I see a lot. So we were talking about the wider structure person. These are the kind of people that have less subtle compensations. They're
Mm.
going to have less, like if they do have compensations, it's really obvious. Like you're going to see them doing something funky. They're not going to like take tension off the muscle in a real subtle way where they won't know it. And I feel like they have less turns because as a more narrow person, you're going to be more likely to get a little shifty. You're not going to have that same stability. And I've just seen
Mm.
with this narrow type of person, like they put more on the axial skeleton. Like it just tends to compress more. And especially as they're hitting failure, it's harder to be aware of that. So that makes a lot of sense because I'm thinking these wider people can keep tension better on their muscles as they're hitting those failure thresholds. That actually makes a lot of sense to me.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, I don't know if this is applicable to what you're saying, but when I was powerlifting, my bench press would there'd be quite a lot of movement when I benched. So I always classify benches as two different types. You've got the guy who is more kind of like broad and presses mostly with his chest and shoulders kind of thing, so a very pure press. And you've got somebody like me who used quite a lot of arch and quite a lot of sort of I depressed into my chest and I sort of used the leg drive out. And that does that kind of point to what you're saying? I used a lot more sink and drive in
Yeah,
my benches.
exactly. Because you have the more ability to get the
Yeah.
force from your axial skeleton, like a
Yeah.
gymnast. Like you're not going to see someone wide doing the kind of shit, transferring their force through their axial skeleton, doing like backflips and stuff like that. So yeah, that
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. That's actually
Yeah.
pretty interesting to think about.
Mm.
And so for your current philosophy of training, like are you more higher volume, higher frequency? Like how do you typically structure stuff for like yourself and like what would you say your audience is mainly? Is it more like guys your age? Is it younger?
Look, according to my YouTube statistics, I'm anywhere from about 25 to 55 seems to be my most popular audience, with some stragglers in the younger groups and the older groups. I think in terms of my philosophy, I've sort of myth busted quite a lot over the years. That seems to be the reputation that I'm getting is like fad busting, not fads, but fads kind of thing. And I seem to lie pretty much in the middle. I'm quite moderate with my views. I'm not a big fan of low volumes, not a huge fan of super high volumes. I fought against super high volumes quite a lot in the research. My general recommendations are somewhere between 8 to 16 sets per body part per week. So fairly moderate. On the lower end, you should be hitting more of those sets to failure. On the high end, perhaps doing an RAR approach like I just described. So I would say I'm very, very moderate. Yeah. I think on the lower end, you've got the Chris Beardsley kind of Paul Carter types, and that's sort of fairly low end, which is fine. Like it certainly works if you can push hard and for certain groups of people at certain times. But the super high stuff, like over and above 20 sets, um, I struggle to see the application of that for a lot of people. I think it's fine in the powerlifting context potentially when you really are taking quite a lot of sets at RAR approach. But if you're bodybuilding, I don't know. I think it's a little bit too much from what I've seen. Yeah, what about you? What are your general guidelines?
Someone asked a question. We'll get into it in a second ago. They wanted to know if we have the same views on protein or whatever. But it's like I told them, I don't have any hard stance views on anything at all besides not lifting like an asshole without any regard for what's going to our shape. Like that's the only thing. Like just don't throw your shape away. Everything else, I think there's tons of gray, tons of variability. So I'm like you. I've done it all. I've done full body like
Mm.
a upper lower split 6 days a week, high volume 18 20 sets. I've done low volume 4 days a week, 6 to 8 sets a week. So I think it can all work as long as you've got like awareness. Like you said, I think a lot of people don't have the awareness to push themselves to failure. And I do think most people should probably leave one or two in reserve because I always talk about like failure for me, there's no change. Like it's just, I'm done. Where you see other people, they start to get shifty, they compress weird.
Mm.
So it's usually better to leave one or two in the tank for most people. And my biggest thing is just don't get so obsessive to where like it starts to like distract you from just putting in work and having fun, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like if
Yeah,
you're enjoying
absolutely.
something and if it's 2% less effective, but you're putting in 50% more effort, like you're gonna get better results. And that's the end game.
Yeah,
Like, what are you trying
absolutely.
to do? Trying to be pro? Like
I
have
think
have
with
fun.
Yeah, I think with the failure argument, I think it's been conflated in the videos that I've seen on YouTube, to the point where people think failure is just hard work. So I think a lot of people don't really understand the definition of failure. So they just conflate that with just pushing hard. So if somebody says, like we're talking about leaving reps in reserve. Now we're not talking about easy training. You and I know 1 hour or 2 hour is hard training, and I think that's part of the miscommunication on YouTube that I see at least. People say you've got to train to failure, therefore they're because they're really aiming at people just training hard. And I think there's this that's miscommunicated. And I see it quite a lot on YouTube, on content creators, whether on YouTube or Instagram. Somebody will say this is a set to failure, and they won't actually fail, which to me is maddening. They'll show a set which is clearly hard. They're making all the faces, but they rack it before they've actually failed, and that's not a threat to failure. So I think for quite a lot of people, and even content creators, they don't necessarily understand what failure is because they don't actually fail. So we have a situation where we're not even dealing in the same terms, so we can't really enter a conversation with like what is the training recommendation for intensity? Because as soon as you and I start talking about RAR, there's going to be a certain portion of people who go, oh well, they promote easy training. That's
Yeah.
the last thing we're saying, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
that's one of the things too, like why studies for this kind of shit are hard to prove because like we were saying,
Mm,
somebody's failure, is it failure till you just can't move anymore in space, or is it failure to where you
yep.
don't have tension on the muscle? It's going to look a lot different for someone who's advanced and has really good control versus somebody who's not as advanced. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, I think it just comes down to awareness and not letting yourself get out of bad positions. If you can do that and get to failure, go for it. If you can only do that one or two reps in failure, go for it. But I'm not a fan of like three or above, unless you are doing it for more skill acquisition, more kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Um,
I'm the same as you with that. About 2 RAR is about my max that I'd go for.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Mm,
Now, do you
yeah.
think that's a mistake that is more like beginners, or is this more intermediate people that are making now that you're seeing?
So you know what? I'm gonna kind of go against the grain here. Like I don't think there's a lack of people working hard on YouTube because the guys who are watching you and me, they're fairly dedicated people who have taken the time to go on YouTube, watch some stuff about this rather than stuff about, Formula One or whatever else, right? They're interested, they're dedicated. So I find it a little bit strange sometimes when I hear the kind of the old man shouting against the cloud talking about how your lifters don't train hard enough. I think for the most part, people who watch our content, if it's fair to categorize your audience as well, probably work quite hard. So I think there are other issues. And I'd like to hear your opinion as well. But for me, I think probably the biggest is consistency. I don't think there's a great deal of consistency with some people. Somebody asked me a question recently, like what is it that separates the guy who gets over 80% of his potential from a guy who just meanders as an intermediate. And I do think consistency is a big part of the problem. I don't think people are consistent. Maybe they'll go to the gym, but they're not consistent with going that extra couple of steps.
Yeah.
Because the difference between an effective set versus a non-effective set at the intermediate to high intermediate level is very minimal. It's probably a few reps. Like we're talking about, it's probably 5 RAR rather than 3 RAR or 2 RAR, or well, 2 RAR. And I think that's it. Consistently going in every single day, as often as you go into the gym, aiming for that minimum 2 RAR, 1-0 failure sets on everything you do, day in, day out. I think that's missing. I think that's the bigger issue for me. I generally think people of my audience and your audience probably do train hard enough.
Yeah. What is like a mistake that you think is kind of occurring in the more advanced trainers, not the beginning people, but the intermediate to even advanced lifters? Is there kind of a common thread that you're seeing that they're a trap they're falling into or something you think they can improve
Yeah.
on?
I think this is probably in your wheelhouse, actually. I think it's the form. I
Yeah.
think when you're an advanced lifter, you got to be a little bit more careful about making sure you're targeting your weak areas. Like a common example, and I'm sure you'll relate to this as well with people you've trained. You've got a guy who's, let's say he's quite advanced, but he's got, I don't know, lagging chest, for example, right? And the way he presses just doesn't target the chest. Like he'll target a lot of shoulders, a lot of tricep to do the work, but he loves that way of training. That's all he knows how to do. He likes to bench press heavy, for example, and he benches in a particular way. And so what happens is you don't get somebody like him to think outside the box and go, right, what do you need to actually get that extra half inch on your chest, which may involve a change of form, a change of position, like you're talking about, or something that I might suggest is maybe getting rid of some of the pressing for a while and adding in some isolation exercises or different exercises, trying to find something that works. So I think when you're advanced, you have to pay a lot more attention to where the stress goes in a given exercise. Like you and I could do the exact same routine and we could get wildly different results in terms of where the exercise is biasing us because of our leverages and the way we like to perform those potentially injuries as well. I think that's a big one for advanced guys that I see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think something that I see certain like intermediate to advanced lifters do is I feel like there's like a point in time where people think like I don't need to really like explore movement variability on my own. I don't need to like just be intuitive anymore because like I got if I set up things externally, it'll match up the way it's supposed to be internally. But that's kind of the opposite. Like so many people
Yes.
are trying to set up this exact right angle or moment arm, but it's like you don't know if your orientation is going to facilitate that. Like most of the time, if you are intuitive, and there are some people that just don't have kinesthetic awareness, and maybe this doesn't apply to them. But most people, I have a lot more faith in most people's like mind muscle connection, and they're intuitive to feel like what actually should be going on in their body. And I feel like a lot of intermediate to advanced lifters just throw that out the window. Like they don't really try variation. I just feel like people stop exploring as they get a little more advanced, and I think that's a big mistake.
I think part of that is the way it's communicated. One of the reasons, I mean, you'll remember this, you're the right age as well. Back in the early days of the internet, it was a lot, powerlifting really took off. Powerlifting and strength sports really took off because it's a lot easier to communicate powerlifting and strength because you're talking about numbers and routines. Whereas bodybuilding, I feel like what was lacking with bodybuilding in the early days, which has gotten better with the advent of YouTube and visual demonstrations, but certainly in written articles, was this type of nuance that we're talking about, like body positions, awareness, feel. And I think all too often some of those things have been ridiculed as
Yeah.
not being important, which is a shame because I think they are important, especially at a certain level. And I mean, they shouldn't interfere with the basics. The basics, progressive overload, all that kind of standardization, that was great. But I think when it comes to bodybuilding nuance, a lot of that is missed in early forms of communication, and that was one of the reasons why strength stuff was so popular back in the early 2000s. And I don't think the situation is that much better in some content creators' wheelhouse. I think for people who are a little bit more concerned with the details and nuance, and there are guys out there like, well, you do a good job of that. I like to think I do as well. And there are a few other guys in the industry who do well with that kind of stuff. But that's possibly a reason why it's missing because it's harder to communicate.
And I feel like there are some really big names out there that could, bring more attention to it, but a lot of stuff makes them question like some of their philosophy and people get like afraid of that. Like people are afraid that there's something they don't know. And it's like, I know there's all kinds of shit I don't know. I want to know what I don't know. Like I want something to make me question whatever my framework is, because that's either gonna like make me believe it even more. I'm gonna have more faith in it, or it's gonna make me better because I'm gonna adapt. And I feel like a lot of the bigger content creators are afraid of that, which I think is kind of silly. I had a question. This is kind of I don't know if you saw the roundtable I did with the guys. That was awesome. That was really fun with GVS and Alberto and all of them. And I asked them a question that I liked. I think I'm going to start asking some of my guests this because like one big thing is I just like I was going back and forth with like Ben Yanes yesterday, and it's just like I feel like so many people don't have like any kind of like their own like rational like any of their own thought, any of their own like comprehension. It's got to all come from someone else, and they just regurgitate it, you know? So what I was wondering is there anything that you do or that you believe or you promote that, science hasn't proven this is the exact right way to do it, but you still think it's probably beneficial?
Yeah, I think probably what alludes to the question you got about protein. So I about a year ago now, I put out some videos to do with my recommendations for there potentially being some benefits to high protein. So I'm not saying this is a blanket recommendation for everyone. Like my general recommendations are starting people off on a moderate, basis. But from what I've seen, at a certain point, it's a lever that we can pull. And I've recommended protein as high as about 1.5 grams per pound of lean body weight, which has seen benefit in the lifters that I've done it with. But I want to stress with this, it's not something that I start people off right off the bat because I don't think it's not necessary. Most people who are watching our content probably won't need to go that high. I've done it when I've been pushing really hard training, particularly when I've been dieting or I've been trying to reach new levels of muscle mass, and I think it's benefited me. Well, I know it's benefited me because it's a lever that I've pulled and it's I've seen a result with that. Now, I don't think that's strictly accepted in the mainstream, but I do think there is a precedent for it to be one interpretation of the literature. So, I mean, this is all stuff I'm getting from Lyle McDonald. He's, I'm a hack. He's the OG, but his perspective is that a lot of the research that we base our recommendations on doesn't provide the complete picture of what we should be. Well, I'll explain. So we're essentially what we've got so far is the research, which is fine, but the interpretation of the research was this is the recommendation to satisfy MPS. But Lyle's perspective, which I tend to believe in based on my experience, is that it's not just about MPS. We also have to
Also
match
protein
for.
synthesis, right? Just in case somebody doesn't know, right?
Yeah, right. Sorry, yeah. So muscle protein synthesis. So two parts of that. Muscles, that is dealing with just the muscles and not the other parts of the body, and synthesis, which is just the creation of. So we're not accounting for the other structures in the body which need protein. So it's not just the muscles we're eating protein for. There are other parts of the skin, nails, organs, and everything. And it's quite a large protein content requirement for those areas too. As well as that, we're just dealing with synthesis. We're not necessarily dealing with degradation. And the way to get a net balance is to account for the degradation too. So Lyle's perspective, which I have seen some value in, is in hard training periods of time, you may need to eat more protein to account for not just the growth and recovery, but also the rest of your regular systems you're always ticking along, as well as to account for the degradation which comes about from hard training and just natural life, which then ramps the protein levels up. And as I say, I don't think most people are in a position where they're pushing hard enough or doing enough volume to need that amount of protein. But I've seen in my own sort of coaching, there is a precedent for certain individuals as a lever to pull for more gains. So I would say that's an area which is not completely accepted by the science, but there is a small pocket of people who have looked at a different interpretation of the research, let's say.
What would you say is like the most common recommendation from like a natural fitness influencer? It's a little lower than that. It's more like 1.2 or zero point 0.8,
Zero point 0.7.
point
Yeah, zero point
0.7.
0.7 to zero point 0.8 grams per pound. I believe it's zero point 0.7 or zero point 0.8 grams per pound
Okay.
is what people generally, or like 1.6 grams per kilogram
Okay.
is what people say is what the research says. The original research was done in the 90s, and essentially that had an interpretation which wasn't really challenged, and that has been generally accepted a range, which I think is a great range. Like if people start off there, fantastic range. But as I say, it's a lever you can pull, and there is potential for it to be you can get better results depending on what you're doing and if you need it. But I
Yeah.
think I think the limiting factor is not the protein. The limiting factor is the training.
Yeah.
Your training is the driver. The protein just supports it.
Do
Just eating
you
a lot of protein is going to get you more gains.
you like protein same every day, or does it change on like training days?
So generally speaking, well, unless I'm doing something weird with carb cycling for certain clients, then yeah, just protein the same on most days. How about yourself? Do you vary it?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, just like no protein shake after non-workout days. But
Mm.
um, yeah, I've had like I've my best look was probably like 1.8 grams per pound of protein, like pretty decent carbs and just super low fat. I mean, I don't know if I felt the greatest. I didn't feel like
Love it.
shit or anything.
Love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I looked really good. I mean, I would now that I'm like not doing the show, like I fast, I go like high fat, low carbs, moderate protein. Like I feel better with that, at least my
Mm.
brain. But
Mm.
physique wise, yeah, I mean, pretty much most bodybuilders will tell you like high protein, higher to moderate carbs, low fat will give you the best look. Just depending on how low you're going with the fat, it might not be sustainable for that long.
Ah, man, that is exactly what I think too. I think I've you know what? pretty much every big bodybuilder I know, and I know a few around here, that's how they diet, So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, when I did physique and I was a little bit smaller, I did a little more keto style, and I was weighing 30 pounds less. But like with once you have any decent muscle, I feel like you go too flat, and I don't know if you lose it, but you just don't have the same look, and there's a difference in the appearance for sure.
Totally agree. It's a great way to diet just for general feel good. Like you said, I feel good on that too. But yeah, I can't get really lean with keto. I've tried. Just
Yeah,
doesn't work for
there's
me.
like you get to like that. At least for me, I'll get to like that 9 or 10%, and it just
Yes.
won't be hard. And then I drop and I'll look so much harder once I bring the carbs back in.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I just find the lack of energy as well when you get down to that body fat level and you don't have much carbs coming in, it's just exhausting. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no. I mean, I mean, I hate the saying because it's very trite and it doesn't always work, but success leaves clues,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. And a lot of times in the bodybuilding world, people like just say that doesn't mean anything. It's just genetics. It's all genetics. You can't have good genetics and do good things. It's just all genetics or just all the drugs.
Well, I think that's the thing. It's been something which I fought against is this preoccupation with every opinion needing a scientific study to support it. Whereas I'm thinking, look, we've had an amazing evolution of bodybuilding, coming right from what the 20s, I guess, the 1920s to where we are now. We've had 100 years of it essentially, and we can see that yes, there has been some confounding issues with drugs, of course, but generally speaking, I don't know, but you'll know more about this than me, but is there a massive difference? I certainly don't see it between what drug taking bodybuilders need, what enhanced bodybuilders need to diet with and train with versus natural guys. Like I'm not sure. I think enhanced guys can get away with some more stuff because potentially if they're the type of person who take a lot of stuff, maybe the drugs can drive the bus. But like I don't necessarily think we're doing drastically different things.
No, I mean, I think the only thing different is, and when you're at a high level, it's really the same. But I think like some of the
Mm.
like more younger, like amateur guys, like they can just diet like more like an asshole. They can kind of push a little more crash diet
Yeah,
because not going to
yeah.
risk quite as much muscle loss, the nitrogen retention. But that's really the only thing. And then the other thing is like the not having the natural ebbs and flows of your testosterone right after like some hard training days and being able to
Mm.
recover a little bit better. But yeah, that doesn't really change anything as far as anything, but maybe you can do a little bit extra volume. That's it, like not a ton,
Mm.
you know. So
No,
yeah, I
exactly.
don't
Yeah,
think it changes that much. I think all the best bodybuilders would be the best regardless of what their cycles are.
I do. Yeah, I do. And I think this is what adds to the sort of robust product that we have now of 100 years of bodybuilding evolution in terms of like diet and stuff. I think we're moving towards this model of, moderate to high protein, lots of carbs, fairly low fat. I don't see that being a problem for natural lifters either. Like I've had natural guys on 30 grams of fat for a while, and that's absolutely fine. There's been no issues. There've never been any issues with me. So I've always responded well to that level of fat and it's never been a problem. So, yeah, I mean, I think in terms of what the minimum fat intakes are from the research, there are some recommendations for there being a cutoff at about that amount, but there's never really a specific reason as to given why. It's
Yeah.
just sort of a general recommendation. If you look at the studies and really look into them, there's never really a proper reason for why should we tap out at 30
They
grams.
just say like
Um,
hormones. Like I don't know what
yeah,
that
yeah, it's just kind
means.
of wave the hand to go. It's kind of hormones. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So I've personally never seen a problem with having fat that low for natural guys. It's fine.
And it's like it's not like a snapshot of a day. It's kind of like over a period of time. So it's like you can really push
Right.
it pretty extreme short term and not have any like negative, especially for a guy, and not have any like negative. Maybe chicks that are premenopausal,
Mm.
maybe a little bit more risk. But yeah, have you been over here much to America? Have you spent much time over here?
No, last time I was over there, I was probably 15 years old. I'd
Oh
love to go at
wow,
some point. Yeah, yeah, I'd
where'd you
love
go?
to. I had family in Columbus, Ohio, so we were there, and also Virginia. I've still got family over in Virginia. I'd like to go at some point. I know the wife wants to go, so
Yeah.
yeah, maybe something we'll do at some point.
Yeah, definitely. If you do, you should come out to the West Coast, man. It's the best spot in the world where I'm at, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't go up to LA. I would stay down in Orange County and San Diego. But yeah,
Okay,
so
Orange County.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely. I was just curious. Yeah, so I've never been over to the to UK. I went to Amsterdam and the Italy and all that, but I've never been over there. I really like to.
Love Amsterdam. Great.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was cool. I was it was like just a stop going to the Greek islands and stuff, but yeah,
Mm.
it was fun. Um, so I had some questions just kind of about like your whole like YouTube journey and things like that because this is always interesting to me. I'm somebody who I mean, I had a YouTube, but it was really just a video hosting thing for like my current like my clients. I just got active over the last year. I was always like in person. I had my gym. I didn't really want to be social media influencer at all. What made you start, and when did you actually start, and what kind of like motivated you and made you think like you actually have something worthwhile to say?
Well, you know what? I actually started a podcast originally because I'd be complete, and we did okay, but it didn't do that well. But honestly, Warren, Jonathan, honestly, I am the reason I started with the podcast was I didn't think anybody would want to see a 40-year-old lifter on YouTube, you know. So I just thought maybe if I just do a podcast, just my voice, then that'll come across well. And that was fine for a couple of years. And I did it after my 2018 show. That didn't really
Who were some
take
of your
off. So
guests you had on there?
yeah, I had some guests on there. I had a few.
Who were some of them?
Let's see. I had James Steele on there from Fisher and Steele, you know, the researchers. I had my friend Joe Jeffries, who's a coach in the UK. He does work with Mike Israetel.
Oh, cool.
I had a couple of other local coaches on. I had a fella on, Chris McNardy, who is now pro, a few kind of amateur bodybuilders and things. But yeah, it was fun. It was okay. But then around about 2020, and by that time I started Instagram as well. But I started the YouTube in 2021, and just I thought I'd give it a shot. You know, some encouragement from some friends, and that took off. So a
So
surprise to me.
you started the podcast in 18, and then the
Yeah, 18.
so it's a different channel, or is it on the same channel?
Well, that because it was all podcast, it was all
Yeah.
on like I didn't want my because the
Yeah.
whole idea was it was just going to be my voice.
Yeah.
So it was like on Spotify, SoundCloud.
Oh, it wasn't video at all?
No, not a
Oh,
video at all.
all right.
Not the early ones. It was
Yeah.
just I think I did have some early ones on YouTube. So you look back on my channel, there are some, but it's just the thumbnail,
Yeah.
you know, with the timestamps. It's not me or anything.
Yeah.
And then I started to get braver, and I put myself on there, and people started to like it and stuff. So yeah,
You got a
it
cool
was
voice, you know. People always like the accents, you know. That always does good too. And so, what was kind of like your first topics you were covering? Like, what did you like? And also, like, what made you think you could like step in front of camera? That's always interesting to me because, like, I see some people do it, and I'm like, do you not see the real world? Like, how do you think you have anything to
yeah.
offer? Like, I wish I had that kind of false confidence.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it wasn't easy the first few years. I think first couple of months it wasn't easy. Even I'd say the first couple of years, but I have a background in being a school teacher. So I was a teacher for 15 years.
What'd you
So
teach?
I've always been in a role of being an educator. So my ability to communicate, I think, is decent.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm known for.
What did you teach?
So I taught computer science.
Oh, okay.
Well, it was ICT prior to 2010. Then the government in this country decided to completely scrap the subject and turn it into computer science. And they decided that every child should know how to program, which makes no sense. But
Especially now with
that's
AI.
a tangent that I don't want to get onto now because I get all political. But yeah, so I retired from that partly because I was annoyed with teaching. I still love teaching. I love being in the classroom. The kids are fantastic, but I didn't like the direction that the education system was going in the UK. There were a lot of decisions made for the benefit of individuals, not for the students. And that used to piss me off and used to grind me the wrong way. So I wanted to do something else. I still like the role, so I did some adult education for a while, and then I did the this full time, and luckily took off, you know, so it's cool. But yeah, sorry. What was your question? What were we talking
You
about?
know, like for when you first started doing your videos, was there a way
Oh
that
yeah.
you like how did oh shit, hold on, sorry, I gotta go get that garage door real quick.
No, you go ahead.
One second.
No worries. Jonathan's getting some work done um, at home, so he just needs to let his workmen in. I'm just gonna check my emails. I wish I had a joke to tell people. I could entertain them in the break. Although I suppose this will get edited out. The proper use of Instagram. Cat memes. That's what it's about.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, it's
No, you're right.
interesting, you know, that you have your teaching background. That seems to be pretty common. You know, I know
Yeah.
GBS, he had the ran downstairs real fast. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
haven't
taught
been
that
doing
in
much
China.
cardio now that I stopped the prep.
Yeah,
So
you and me
yeah, I
both.
mean GBS was the English teacher, and I used to tutor corporate finance and statistics, and I just think
Ah,
there's
right.
something like we like conveying information, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I feel blessed to have been in this kind of role, you know, my whole life. It feels great. But yeah, in the early days, a lot of my content was actually, to be fair, not that dissimilar to what I do now. My coaching philosophy was fairly set. I mean, I've changed my opinion on a few things, but my coaching philosophy was fairly set. I was just kind of communicating stuff that I did. So a lot of my ebooks that all my ebooks all represent phases of my life. So like blocks of 3 to 5 years of training that I actually did. So that was what I used to talk about back in the early days, how I got to where I got, what I did, that kind of stuff. And Yeah, as I say, people seem to like the authenticity, they seem to like my manner and everything. And it's been nice recently. I'm still getting used to it, to be honest, the whole idea of being like a Z-list celebrity, like bottom rung. But it's been nice to get like recognition. It was great to get your message, and I got a shout out from Ben Yanes recently and a few other guys. So it's been really nice. It's been nice. It's the professional recognition. I'm sure you
Yeah.
kind of think the same. It's nice, isn't it? So yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because whenever I came up like around some huge social media people. So when I in 2012, I was working at Gold's Gym and I was running our training department. One of my trainers was Bradley Martin, and I remember he
Yeah,
would
yeah.
all it was like he just started posting and stuff. I remember he'd always try to get me to like, you should get on this Instagram thing. I'm like, who gives a fuck? People have their own lives. They don't want to watch us fucking lift weights. Like who
Yeah.
and then I switched gyms. I went to our West Hollywood location to take over that one, and we had Rich Piana there, who I spoke
Wow.
to every single day. And I'm like, wow, somehow it still took me another 10 years to get into social media
Yeah, I
after
know.
having these two guys. So yeah, I think it's just interesting because I think there are people out there that have like a lot to say, but it's understandable to have the anxiety and not feel like you can
Yeah.
like present it in a way people are going to judge you. Was there anything that you did like mentally to overcome that, or was it just kind of repetition? Were you doing like a lot of takes at first and trying to get it perfect, or you just put it out
Still
there?
do. Still do, yeah. Yeah, no, my very first video, I was in my home gym and I was just sort of talking to the camera. I didn't edit that at all, just all in one take. But as I got more into it, I got some editing software and I started to edit things a lot more. And yeah, I do still and ah quite a lot. I don't know, do you find it difficult? Sometimes I talk to the camera, I find it kind of strange. It's distracting. You see yourself in front of you of the camera. It's kind of distracting, and I do end up doing a lot of retakes and stuff. So I wouldn't say I'm fully confident, but it's enough that people seem to appreciate the clarity that I bring to the field. So it's enough. But no, nothing. I think a lot of it was different processes. Like early on, I had notes wherever it was. They were almost my shield, my social media shield. Like my notes would be right here. People remember the early videos. I always had notes, and it was essentially because they would keep me on track, and I could read off the note, not read off the notes, but I could use them as pointers for the next part of the discussion. Whereas now, what I do is I will have broad pointers, but then I'll talk around the subject, and I find I get a better response from that because it comes across as more organic. If I overwrite a video script, it just seems like it's way too scripted. What's your experience with that?
Well, I kind of have different things that I do. So it's like I mean, I'm a huge fan of like stand-up comedy. I've done stand-up and like it's just
Really? Wow.
yeah, just like open mic, just more
Yeah,
of like a
yeah.
therapy thing. It was really fun. But so
That's
it's like
awesome.
if I'm doing a video like a scrolling through IG where it's like quick things, I'm going through, 5 to 20 minute sections, so it's like one after the other. Like that is kind of fun because I can just like go off the top of the dome. I don't gotta like think it through and sometimes I gotta edit some of the ridiculous shit I said out. But it's like to me, like that's fun. It's really hard to edit and go through all that. But then when it's more like a deep biomechanics thing, it's like then I gotta like I'm not the kind of person to like write, but I literally will think every step of it through and do a couple of the big notes and I'll go back and rewatch it, make sure I didn't like fuck up too bad. And if I did, I'll redo it or I'll put a little thing in there because that's one thing. When you do as long as videos as I do and it's just deep shit, you fuck up every now and then. So it's like you gotta
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you gotta be aware of that. But
You
yeah,
get into really heavy topics, don't you? With the so I saw a video that you did recently critiquing Joe Bennett.
yeah,
Um and I think that got some traction with Ben Yanes.
yeah,
What so I don't know much about this area. I think this is more your guys, so I'll kind of leave you to it. But
yeah.
what is the I don't know, I'm sure your audience have heard of it, but just maybe it'd be interesting for the discussion. What are the sides of that argument? Like what are people saying?
Oh yeah, so me and I feel actually I didn't go that hard at Joe. Like I kind of did, but not really. Like it was more joking. But I think I did hurt his feelings a little bit. He messaged me a few things. Hopefully, he still comes on the pod. But honestly, I'm passionate about this shit because this is what my life has been over the last 5 years. Like I help people. Like I have my daily clients that I help look good and feel good, but then I deal with so many pain clients from the PTs I network with, and it's like when I had my former lens of looking at things, just the basic dead man anatomy, levers and pulleys, point A to point B and origin to insertion, it's like sometimes that works, but a lot of times it doesn't. There's some underlying feature, some underlying thing that like I was missing. And after kind of getting into the expansion compression model or PRI and Bill Hartman stuff, you just start to understand like how complex this system is. And like so like Joe and a lot of the people, their whole thing, and the main disagreement comes down to the chest. And I've got the videos on it. The whole thing is to create a better like fiber alignment. You always hear the arch the back, arch the back. And he used in the video that I did, Joe used Ronnie and Jay as examples of people who have really good pecs because they have a naturally big rib cage. And so they get the fiber orientation right where they want it. But he's saying if you want to get that same impact, you have to like arch your back to create the same orientation. Where I'm like, well, they're doing that with a flat back. That's a very different thing than arching to create it. Because as soon as you do that, now we don't have the ability for the posterior rib cage to expand backwards, like on your inhale. So your scapula gets pinched back, and then that's going to take away our ability to get the full compression cycle we want on the exhale, right? Because we don't want to do a powerlifting thing, right? Where it's right there and that's all that moves. We want to get the pressure gradient. We actually want the sternum to move a little bit. And so if you pin back and you're only thinking about moving from point A to point B, you lose the full stretch actually because again, you're compressed, you're not actually stretching the front tissues, and then you lose the ability to get the full contraction. So like my big thing is like don't fucking arch your back on a flat to try to make it a decline. If you want a decline, get on a fucking decline. Like same thing if you're on an incline and you want to make it more flat, just go to more flat. And it's something that, anybody can feel. Like as soon as you actually like volumize your pecs, it's like I did pecs 4 days ago, 3 exercises, and they're still fucking sore. It's like most people can feel the difference, right? Versus as you are a power lifter, I'm sure you lift different now as a bodybuilder and you probably feel your pecs a lot more. I'm assuming you don't do the same huge arch and all that, right?
So, I mean, one thing that I did think of, perhaps it's a degree of arch, because I remember about, I think it was a year ago, I left a comment on one of your videos, just in support of you. I said, this is great. But at the time, I was getting a lot of comments from bodybuilders asking about how to get a better arch and also how to use leg drive. And my perspective as a former powerlifter was, you don't want those things as a bodybuilder. So I wonder if your disagreements with Joe and Ben are potentially due to perhaps the level of arch you're talking about,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I've seen
that's
some
all.
pretty
That's all
wild
it comes down
arches.
to is the compression of the shoulder blades and the
Mm,
rib cage not moving. It just staying flared because you can change your sternum angle without having to arch the fuck out of your back. And there are
mm.
a couple body types that may need to think arch. Those would be the real pull down to the front, but that's not typically what you see. You usually see the more kind of puffed out ribs and the anterior tilt of the pelvis. So yeah,
So is your kind of perspective like with Ben and Joe, is it wildly different, or is there
no,
a
I mean,
middle
so
ground
I
somewhere?
had Dr. Pat Davidson on the podcast, who's great at this stuff, way better. And his opinion is the same as mine. Like, if you take the shape into account, all that shit still applies. But like, if you don't, then it doesn't. And it's like for single, like I'm looking at something like my elbow joint. Yeah, you can apply a lot of the lever mechanics theory to that because there's not a lot of dynamic shape changes occurring. But the example I gave and how the body actually is versus like a lever model where it's just linear lines of pull, like we have like you gotta think of like a balloon animal getting shape changes everywhere. As you're changing something here, it's changing the shape locally, but it's also changing the shape a little more distally too. It's having an impact, just not as much. So it's like a dynamic stabilization instead of like a keep everything stable, nothing moves, isolate this. You want to flow to get the tension where you want at the end gradient, not just pull from here and only do that. So it's a complicated way to think of things, but it's
Yeah.
pressure dynamics, it's fluid dynamics, and it's how that internal pressures and transmits to force externally through our bones, through our fascia, through our muscles. It's way more complicated than just pull from here and that's your torque. So that's pretty much the main argument is that if you keep your
Yeah.
shape, all that shit can still apply. You just don't lose your shape.
Mm. Is there anything to be said for what amongst natural and sort of unequipped powerlifters, they're generally known for having fairly thick chests, and quite a lot of them would, sort of retract their shoulder blades. So I don't that mechanics is not my area, but is there something you said for the fact that most powerlifters probably will retract quite heavily and arch at least to a reasonable degree, and they generally will have fairly thick pecs. So how do we amalgamate that with what you're saying?
Well, I've never seen a powerlifter on stage have better pecs than a bodybuilder on stage. I'll
Okay.
say that. Yeah. And then a lot of times there might be thickness and size. A lot of times the sternal fibers, they're not there as much. Sometimes you see these upper
Mm.
fibers. Like I have got a guy I'm going to put on my new Instagram post. He's a crazy powerlifter. Does like 420. He's probably like a buck 80. The most developed like upper sternal fibers ever. But these lower ones that aren't
Mm.
getting the real stretch, they're not there. They don't have the cross striations at all. And the other thing is just the shoulder health. If you're going to
Mm.
press for maximum weight, doing it like a power lifter, like is probably safer than trying to do it with relative motion, but that is not better than doing like maximum weight that you can with relative motion, letting your scapula move, actually following like the natural glenohumeral rhythm, instead of keeping everything stuck. So it's gonna be a lot better shoulder health. But I did powerlifting as well whenever I was real young. I was in high school, and then I did it one other time after, and I pressed pretty flat compared to everybody, and I had a pretty good bench, and my pecs were much better than most of the powerlifters. So I would say you can get some thickness for sure, and a lot of it depends on how you press too. Like you'll see some powerlifters here, and then you don't see anything but their arms moving. Then you'll see some they actually do get some pec fibers involved. They have like a little bit of scapula movement, so it is a little bit individual as well on how they do it. But I would say in
Okay.
general, you're going to see bodybuilders with far more developed pecs than powerlifters for sure. Not just because of the volume too, because
Yeah.
traditional though they're going to do a little more flat back, especially with
Yeah, I mean,
the deep
there must
belly.
be a degree of, yeah, there's probably a degree of individuality to it. I mean, I know coming from powerlifting, my most developed areas were my chest, my back, and my legs, you
Yeah,
know. Um, so just from me, just from my own, experience, because I'm not an expert in this, the bench pressing with retracting quite heavily, that worked the hell out of my chest. And my chest is still a very dominant part of body part. Same with my back, traps for deadlifting, same with my quads for squatting. So I've always thought on stage you can tell who's putting time, pulling heavy, benching heavy, and all that kind of stuff. So, and I always find with bodybuilders who've been bodybuilding from day one, they tend to have more balanced, flowing physiques.
yeah.
Whereas with a powerlifter, you can definitely tell, right, that guy powerlifts is like massive thick chest, massive thick back, massive thick legs. But I'd have to look into your
I think
your
a lot
your
of the
stuff.
thickness on the powerlifters too is just straight rib cage elevation too. The fact that they
Okay.
are so arched and they are so prominent too.
Hmm. That's interesting. I think it's always good to get these because the arguments into the fold because what I really liked about your content when I messaged you about 10 months ago was the fact that people were asking about leg drive and a hyper arch for the bench for as a bodybuilder. And I thought that was just crazy. So I think it's really important to get more voices in just so we can come closer to the truth,
Yeah, and
which is
there's
great.
always, like I said, there's always individual variability, and there's amount
Yeah.
that some people
Yeah.
connect to. Like some people, like I was saying, even if they're not super closed down, for them, like they're thinking they're retracting a lot, but they're just getting the shoulders like in a decent spot. So it's like
Right,
whatever
right.
you
Yeah, of
connect
course.
to. Like I'm all about
Mm,
the mind muscle connection. So if you
mm,
retract and you try it both ways, and you try it like actually doing to let your sternum move, and the other thing is too, like you can't do the same range of motion. You actually have to do a lot less range of motion to actually keep
mm.
that tension there. If you try to do the same range of motion like a powerlifter, you won't connect. But have you
Ah,
changed
interesting.
your pressing style now that you're not
Go for
powerlifting?
like you'd go for more like this, kind of like halfway.
So
Interesting.
I would
Yeah,
be
interesting.
get that
Yeah,
expansion. I'd go probably right before I hit to my chest. So past 90, maybe like 100, and then depress that sternum, really feel everything in there. And it's like I've always
interesting. Yeah.
connected with my pecs. I've always done it to like some degree, but like over the last like 3 years, like for 2 years I did pecs every 10 days just because they were so like
Okay.
connected and so developed, overdeveloped compared to
That's
other
awesome.
stuff.
Yeah, very cool.
Do you still press the same or have you changed a little bit now that you're not powerlifting?
I still do press the same. I mean, as I've gotten older, I never had any issues with my shoulders when I was powerlifting, but like as I've gotten older, just from age, my shoulders occasionally flare up. So I find that I feel better when I retract them, and that's just one of those. So I
I'd be
think
curious. I would
my
love to. I wish I could see you in person, but I would love to like fuck with your mechanics and see what would
That'd
happen.
be great. No, yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah.
I'm always up for learning. I think, you get to the point where we are, like we're similar ages, and you've done so much training. You have to adapt. You have to learn. You have to adapt. And I think I wouldn't be where I am now, being able to carry on lifting the way I'm lifting and lifting heavy without making adaptations and changes. So yeah, I'm always up for learning for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm huge on individual sensation and feel. It's like I'll
Yeah,
tell you what I think and why I feel that way biomechanically, but if you do everything right and you connect to it another way, like I'm not going to tell you you're fucking stupid, don't do that. I'm like, awesome. If you're getting gains and it feels fucking good and you're pain free, then fucking rock it. So,
yeah.
let's see. I had a couple more questions about the YouTube stuff just because it's
Yes.
interesting to me because it's new
Mm.
for me. So this is all you do, right? You're full time online.
Yeah, yeah, I went full time in 2020. So I had a pretty reasonable following in my hometown. I live in a fairly small city, so people kind of knew I was from competition and stuff. But then 2021 went launched to YouTube, and that sort of presented a much more global audience, which was very nice. But yeah, I do it full time. So I essentially it's almost like two jobs. You know what it's like making YouTube videos, which look reasonable. There's a lot of time that goes into the subject matter. a lot of scripting, a lot of the thumbnails, text, all that kind of stuff. So I do that as essentially half my job, which is outreach, that Instagram and various other things that I do for outreach and client retention, client outreach, sorry. And then the rest of it is client check-ins, managing my clients, and I have a few different tiers that I work with people. I have the one-to-one stuff, which we all do, and that's my bread and butter. But I also have a coaching group, which is nice. It's more of a light touch form of coaching where they still get all my support, but that's more of a group thing.
Is this on an
And then I have
app or
various.
it's all through like docs?
At the moment, I do it through Discord, but I do have something in the pipeline for the end of the year,
Nice.
which I'll reveal at some point because it's in the works at the moment. So yeah, that's in the Discord, and then I have various consultation services that I do. So if somebody wants to sit down and talk to me for an hour, they can hire me and stuff. So yeah, yeah, full time.
Are you married? Do you have kids?
Married, no kids. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like how's like how do you balance your relationship with your work? Is it like easy or is this something you struggle with at all? I mean, it's probably easier without kids.
Yeah, I have a very understanding wife.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
we just
That would
she's
be
very busy.
amazing.
Yeah.
That would be awesome to have an understanding wife.
I mean, she bought me a cup of tea before I was going on here because she knew I was going to be busy for the hour. So she's great. But yeah, she has a busy job too. She's a manager where she works. She's a school teacher, and as a result, we just make sure our schedules are aligned. So once a week, we kind of sit down with our calendars and just make sure we're all mapped out for the weeks on Sunday. So I'll know what her crunch points are in the week if she's very busy, and then I'll sort of be a bit more active in the house or things that she might need. Same with me. If I have like today, she knew I was going to be doing this, so she came and brought me a cup of tea, and she's kind of taking care of some stuff in the kitchen. So we have a nice partnership with that, just to make sure we both feel supported. That's kind of the way that I do it. Yeah.
Do you have like a set schedule that you try to keep work wise, or is this kind of like all over?
Yeah. You know what it's like. Being the entrepreneur, there's no real schedule, but I generally work 6 days a week. So Saturdays I try and take off as my mental health day, as it were. But yeah, Sunday to Friday, and then I have a fairly tight schedule for things that I need to do because if I'm doing the YouTube stuff and all my clients and consultations, and then potentially every now and again I'll do stuff like this, it's very tight.
Yeah.
Now, like I said to you in DMs, I can move stuff around, which is
Yeah.
fine, but the actual schedule is pretty damn tight. So I'm in the gym at 6 a.m. in the morning. I get back to the house at 8 o'clock, start work, and I'm pretty much go until about 6 p.m. And that's on all days, every day, apart from Saturday. So yeah, it's a pretty full on schedule. I mean, I will say, well, on the days I'm tired, I say it's a blessing to be busy.
Yeah.
It's a nice position that I'm in. But yeah, it is a busy schedule.
Do you miss having in-person people? Is that something you don't do at all anymore?
I did very briefly, but majority of my work's been online. I
Yeah.
did very briefly. In 2017, I did some work at a local gym. It was fine. I can't say I enjoyed it as much as what I do now. I find being able to offer a more, well, I won't say that because I know you do a lot of in-person things. I think it's just different.
Yeah.
I think it's different. There are pros and cons for either. My personal preference has always been the online stuff, so I kind of stick to that space. But I can definitely see the advantages of doing more in-person stuff with certain groups of people. But for me and my audience, I've always wanted to be online.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like where I'm at now, a little more balanced. There was a time where I was doing like 60 hours in person, which was just that's so draining mentally, just
Yeah,
being present
absolutely.
for an hour where it's not like you're sitting at a computer and you can like look around and think for a second. Like you got to be 100% there. Now I'm doing like 30 hours a week and it's really good. And I think if I didn't have in-person clients, I'd just be a fucking hermit and like wouldn't socialize at all. They're like my only friends. So that's good. But yeah, the big benefit is obviously like being able to have like a live testing subjects, right? These are people that have been with me for 10, 15 years. So it's like they're my crew. I can always if there's something new I'm sure about, I'm not sure they'll be the guinea pig. So I like that. But I definitely think that if I was only doing in person, I would have burnt out for sure.
Do you
It's
do
cool to
online
like
stuff as well?
what's that?
Do you do online stuff as well?
Yeah, yeah, I do a good bit of online. It's probably about 65% in person. And the thing is like my in person, like where I'm at, like it's like I charge a lot. So it's like it costs me like doesn't really cost me money, but it's gonna make me a lot less money right now to do all the online stuff, especially if it takes away
Yes,
from
gotcha.
like that's with us. Like that's why I had to wait till today because I ended up having cancels. I'm like, I can move people, but I'd rather not miss 300 bucks to talk to you. I
Yeah, of
love
course.
talking
Yeah, yeah,
to you.
yeah.
You
Oh,
know?
if you ever want to talk more about the online stuff, feel free to pick my brains.
Yeah, yeah,
Happy to
definitely.
help. Happy to help.
Yeah, I'm curious, like I said, especially about the ebook stuff. So, I had a couple questions. People gave you some good questions. Actually got some decent ones for you compared to some other ones. So we'll run through these real
Okay.
quick. Someone had the question on bulking, cutting, or maintaining, and then someone else said that you're a fan of over bulking for certain people. Maybe we can touch on that.
Overbooking for certain people. Not really, no. No, I
No,
mean, most of my clients stay pretty lean year round.
you're more like a
Um,
main gainer.
No, no, but I just don't let my guys get out of shape. I mean, you know what it's like. If you're even if you're gaining 30 pounds from stage weight, you're still gonna probably have some abs. So,
Yeah.
I think you can get to a healthy weight and still maintain a good semblance of athletic prowess. So no, I definitely don't agree with you over bulking. That's not me at all. But equally speaking, I don't want people to stay too lean. So again, I'm quite moderate in that respect. I think you can get to about, say, 20% body fat, which for regular society standards is a lean person. Like 20% is still pretty lean. It's a flat stomach. And that's probably about the limit that I would want any one of my clients to be in at any point during the year. And then kind of bounce around between maybe 12 to 20 for most of the year, I think is acceptable. But no, I think recomping is a fine option for certain people. Like for example, I've got one client at the moment. He's fairly new. He's come up to me. He's quite heavy, and he wants to bulk more. And I I warned him against that. I was like, this is not the play right now. Trust me, you don't need to, first of all, because you don't need the extra bulk on you, and also it's not going to look great. It's not going to be good for your health. So I've got him to the point where he's recomping, and that's fine for him because he's able to gain. If I can tune in his training so he's able to gain muscle, drop body fat at the same time, which is the better option. I wouldn't want somebody who's already overweight to be bulking more. That makes zero sense. And I've only recently, just today actually, talked him into a cut. So we're going to do a cut, probably drop about 30 pounds. And I bet he's not going to lose an ounce of strength because he doesn't need to be that heavy. It's way too heavy. So no, with that, unless there's some special consideration, let's say a guy is come from being 350 and he's hanging out at 250, then fine. He's already done a great job. But for the vast majority of my clients, we want to walk around, look like bodybuilders most of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder what they were talking about. They said there's like some specific instance where you might recommend someone bulking a little bit higher than they're comfortable. That's not something you ever recommend.
No.
Yeah, that's not
I
really
mean,
something I'd
if
say.
if I've said no, I mean, I'm not calling anyone out because my audience is usually very loyal. So if I've said something to that effect, maybe I meant something else. I'm not calling anybody a liar or anything. But yeah, maybe somebody can DM me with
Well, maybe they
like a
just consider
citation.
20% over bulking in their head too. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Exactly. But I mean, if anyone can, maybe DM me a citation, and I'll maybe clarify my views on that in a future video.
Okay.
But no, my audience is usually very loyal, so I don't think anyone's made that up. So yeah.
Okay. Tips for 50-year-old newbies. So like someone said the parents want to start exercising and like how would you
Yes.
recommend they ease into it as far as maybe volume or structure or anything like that or anything you think?
Well, I mean, I will say, your age is pretty much how you feel. Like, I don't feel 44. So 50s, and my elder brother's 50, and he looks very similar to me. He's not particularly out of shape, and he doesn't take it as seriously as I do. But so I don't think it's a death sentence. Like, a 50-year-old doesn't need to approach things so gently. Like, he's not going to fall apart. We're not that old. But I think just like I would with anyone, start with a reasonable program. I've got a couple of programs on Boost Camp, and they're free. So by all means, run one of those. Run either the Wizard or run the full body or the upper lower because they're low volume, beginner based routines. So in an ideal scenario, if I was training an absolute beginner like something like these, I would say 3 times a week, full body, a very basic full body, potentially not even training arms, just sort of 5 exercises, maybe with a couple of additionals if they need to. So a chest press, an overhead press, a some kind of upper back pull, some kind of squat or leg press pattern, some kind of hip hinge pattern will be fine. Add in some accessories if you want to. In the beginning, I think if you're a ranked beginner, you are going to be able to run those exercises 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, on alternate days, and you'll recover just fine. From the beginning, probably just one set is enough. You can do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday. As you get more advanced, feel free to add in a second set. I have in the past done 1 month of one set 3 times a week. Second month, 2 sets. Third month, 3 sets. And then they're off. And then after that, we can look into some adaptations to allow them to carry on training 3 times a week, or perhaps move them to an upper lower. But in the beginning, you're looking for repeatability on exercises which they can do safely. So we don't need to use the barbell lifts obviously. I mean, it's 2025. I'm sure nobody still believes that, but just for the record, you don't need to squat, bench, deadlift. Just pick a machine where you feel safe and you can run that, and that's fine. You have some great lower back machines in most gyms these days, which work as well, and they can run that a reasonable routine, hitting most muscles for like 3 times a week, starting with low volume, moving to high volumes, aiming for that repeatability, just aiming to get stronger over time. That's kind of roughly what I would recommend. Yeah. And that'll take them probably the first year.
Do you have a general like cardio recommendation just for like GP people? Like, what's your typical cardio?
Cardio, I think it depends on what they can do because oftentimes these people come in to the situation with their own history of running. You know, like a lot of guys will come
Yeah.
into this quite late, but they're fairly competent runners. In that case, just run by all means. From my understanding of the research, improvements in cardiovascular capacity start at about 3 times a week minimum on alternate days. So a perfect schedule for this fella's parents would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday weights, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday running or some kind of cardio modality, getting the heart rate into a reasonable, maybe zone three, zone two kind of range, and just basing it, just feeling it out based on how you feel and how you're recovering on the day. That's all. And see some small improvements over time. That's it. Never pushing anything too hard. Just allow the sheer regularity of your training to see small improvements. You can push yourself later down the line, but if you're trying to amalgamate your cardio regime with your training regime, you got to be really gentle to begin with, or you can run into some ankle problems, knee problems,
Yeah.
and various things. So yeah, if you do that, you should be able to introduce things fairly manageable. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with that entirely. Quick question that I had was, is there any like unconventional moves you do, or maybe you don't program, or anything you do program?
Probably the one that I'm known for is the Kelso shrug. So I started talking about the Kelso shrug in 2021.
What is that exactly? I've heard it. I'm going blank right now.
So way back, I think it was I had a book from a guy called Paul Kelso. He's an American native who lived out in Japan. He was the Japanese powerlifting coach for a number of years. Very well respected powerlifting coach. He had a couple of books from back in the day, and one of the books was Kelso's Shrug book, where he actually talked about. I think you'd find it quite interesting if you grab yourself a copy. He talked about shrugs for all different areas. It was moving the shoulder girdle like back and forth, which you might enjoy reading about, particularly with your what you
Yeah.
were saying earlier, as well as moving the shoulders blades back and forth, which is the Kelso shrug. And he had other types of shrug movements. He had shrug in the pull down position where you would just shrug your shoulders down. Um, the most popular one was the one with the row, shrugging your shoulders backwards. So the idea is, and this has been my experience, having done it now for 20, 25 years, is you put yourself in a row position. Let's say some kind of chest supported row, like a prime row or a gym leg or whatever, right? Keep your arms straight, turn your elbows out a little bit, and that allows you to sort of pull back, right? And what you're looking for is a strong retraction of the shoulder blades into the back without bending your arms, which can be quite difficult for people to get the hang of
Yeah.
because some people will naturally want to bend their elbows, but if you can do it without bending your elbows, there is significantly more poundage potential for a rearward shrug than there is for a row. So you can get that real nasty kind of thickness in your middle back with this exercise. So for me, a complete back routine will involve various vertical pulls, horizontal pulls, pulls with elbows out, pulls elbow more in, as well as the shrug. I think that rounds everything out. I've definitely seen quick improvements in my middle back posture, and also more long-term improvements in my middle back thickness. I mean, my back is one of my more standout body parts, and I think that has come from lots of deadlifting a lot of heavy weights, but also from shrugs. Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, I haven't tried that one. I've heard of it. I've seen it now that you're just talking about, but yeah, I've
it's
never
good.
tried that
Yeah, it's
one.
good.
The
I
only
also
thing,
think people should do it as a standalone exercise. There's this trend at the moment of doing it after your shrugs. Sorry, after your rows. I don't think that's the right play because after your rows, assuming you're working hard enough, you should be tired, you should be fatigued. You're not going to be able to give a Kelso shrug set its due right after because there's a cardiovascular demand to hard training as well. So all I like is I like it programmed as a completely separate exercise. So on a pull day, for example, I might do some kind of pronated exercise, some kind of more sagittal plane, and then something like the Kelso shrug. I think it's a great way of training.
nice.
Yeah.
Um, how do you recommend adjusting your training frequency as you get older or volume, intensity, that kind of stuff?
So as you get older, I think this is going to vary based on where you are in your training. So I kind of prefer more to talk about it in terms of advanced, intermediate and beginner. I think beginners should do low volume because I don't think there's a need to do high volume, and it can be a bit overwhelming. They can grow on blow splits, they're fine. But I think as a beginner, like I've outlined, fairly high frequency, 3 times a week, low volume works pretty well. As an intermediate, I think that's where volume requirements are the highest, and that's you
Yeah.
need that to progress. Yeah, I think because the weight on the bar isn't necessarily that high, your ability to push isn't necessarily that great, but you need more mechanical stimulus than when you're a beginner. So as a result, your practical volume goes up. Now, as an advanced lifter, you probably do need more stimulus to carry on growing, like every adaptation in the body. But practically speaking, the volume tends to be lower because your ability to focus is better. Hopefully, your exercise selection is better, like we've been talking about. And the weights on the bar is just far higher as well. So you generally tend to work with lower volumes, or if you do higher volumes, it's with an RR approach. Now, how that changes when you're older, I mean, it's so individual because some 50-year-olds, they're going to be fairly well trained, they're going to be fairly spry, they're going to not have any aches and pains. Also, mentally, they're going to be a lot more confident with what they can do, what their bodies can do. Like I've got a 70-year-old on the books right now. He benches within an inch of the world powerlifting record. Like he's a
Shit.
phenom. It's
Oh,
ridiculous. Like, he said to me first thing, he said, "I don't want to hear about my age. Never mention it." I was like, "Okay, cool. You're the boss."
wow.
You know, he's a beast, absolute monster. So for him, what he can do versus somebody else who's maybe 60, 10 years younger, but comes into it with a poor, not a poor attitude, but maybe not quite the confidence is that he should have. It could be vastly different. This is why, to your previous question with the guy with the 50-year-old parents, let's clarify that's not that old,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think with the age thing, it kind of depends on your physical history, but also your confidence in yourself. I would like to think at 50, in 6 short years, I'll be fairly confident with what I can do.
Yeah, and it's so different. Like I just posted a story today. I don't know if you happen to see that of a client of mine who's 60, and I mean
Yes.
she's a smoke show and she looks amazing. I
Yeah, she
mean
looks great.
she looks like she's 40, and her 60 is a lot different than,
Absolutely.
the 60 that I grew up with in Texas.
Yeah, she's kicking ass, man. Well done with that.
Yeah, that's the thing is like all my people have been with me for so long. They're all pretty solid. And I have like one couple that I've been training for 15 years, and they were mid to late 60s when we started. So now they're pushing 80s, and that's the only one where I've seen that, the regression is going to happen. And the only thing that we really change is just probably intensity a little bit, just because of recoverability
Yeah.
and the
Mm.
chances of something going haywire. Like, and it's kind of sad to see like, oh, we used to be able to push right there, but for 80, they fucking kick ass, and that's the biggest thing
That's
is,
amazing.
you got to
I
compare
love that.
yourself to your peer
See,
group.
that's what it's about, isn't it? Like getting real results from real people. I think these sort of internet disagreements and stuff, they're a very minor part of what we do.
Yeah.
And nobody should, think poorly of anyone if people are having an internet argument. Like no, there's no side taking because we're all after just getting great results for people, for real people like you are. Like that story of that 60-year-old was fantastic. I love that. And that's what it's about. And I think if we can just make sure we all focus on that, it's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly.
Love
And
it. Love it.
then I actually had some really good Reddit questions. We'll go through these real quick. I was surprised. They love you over there on the natural body
Okay.
side over there. So
Yeah.
one of the questions was, what has kept you motivated as you've gotten older and you've had the little bit of the changes start to occur?
Yeah, yeah. Geez, that's a great question. God, what's kept me
Because
motivated?
I'm losing my motivation, so this is going to help me hearing what you say.
You know what? I think what it is, I've learned a lot about my personality over the years. Um, I like a very small selection of hobbies, but what I do enjoy doing is getting really into those hobbies. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things I wouldn't be able to talk about confidently, at a dinner table. I just sort of nod and go, okay. But there's things that I do and I enjoy. I really love taking a deep interest in those and getting good at those things. So I don't think I've ever burst onto a field. Like my teaching career was a 15-year career, ended up in a very good position, great CV. YouTube is now along the same lines, but I never really burst onto the scene and everything. What I do is when I hook my teeth into something, I learn all I can. Because I think a lot of things is a knowledge gap, and you'll know this from clients that you train. You're just feeding that knowledge to people. And if I have a new activity, I want to learn all about it. I want to get better. And my early experiences with lifting taught me that knowledge was the difference between where I was starting off, not particularly genetically gifted in the lifting realm, but knowledge was what brought me to where I am now. I wish I had more pictures of when I was a teenager because my God, I look so different. You wouldn't expect like this. So for me, it's that whatever it is, if it's something that I'm interested in doing, I love learning all about it. And so lifting has been a lifelong endeavor for me for learning. Every time my body's changed or my goals have changed, I thought to myself, how can I learn? Because I will openly admit, in 2014, when I ended my powerlifting career, I needed to learn about bodybuilding and I got so into learning. I learned from everyone, from everything, eventually to the point where I thought, right, I know a bit about this, and I'm still doing that now. So I guess it is the desire to learn and be open-minded. I also think, as a content creator, it's a good habit because if at any point you say to your audience, like, I know everything, there's nothing else to learn, I think you're dead as a content creator because you've effectively said there's nothing else I can teach you. And that's a
Yeah.
horrible position to be in. And I know some content creators who refuse to be wrong, refuse to acknowledge other people's opinions, and their channels are dying because of that, because no one takes them seriously anymore, because they're just, well, their view is stagnant and it's old. So I think, yeah, you've got to carry on learning. Yeah.
To
I
be
mean, I've
honest,
even, yeah, go on.
I was
Sorry.
gonna say that's one of the reasons why I kind of went a little harder at Joe's. One of my viewers said that they had asked him a question, and his response was, "I have the experience. I've trained the athletes. Just listen to me. Don't question me." And so then I was like, "Oh, that's a little annoying."
I mean, I'm sure you guys will figure it out. It'd be nice if you get him on and,
Yeah,
see what
I think Joe's great.
their
Yeah,
view is.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like I said, I really admire him as what he's done in the industry, and he does seem like a
Oh, he's
really good
great.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great content. Great guy. Never spoke to him personally, but yeah, from what I've seen, very respectful guy, great content, super experienced with a real OG. Yeah. Yeah.
How important is strength when the focus is hypertrophy?
That's a great question, Wow. So I'll say this. I went through a period of time where I thought it was just pointless because this was coming off the and I realized this over the course of the time that I've coached is a lot of my views when I was younger just didn't really pan out because I was looking at them from this narrow lens of where I was. It's like the Plato cave analogy. Like I was like looking at a small slither of my life. Like after powerlifting, I thought strength for bodybuilding was pointless because it just contributed to aches and pains and injury, which is bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Because what created eventually the physique that I had in 2018, which is the biggest I was ever, and I was probably the strongest in a wider range of exercises, was the base that I built off powerlifting. And I see people making that mistake now in the YouTube space as well. They'll come from a background of powerlifting and they'll come out of that saying strength is pointless. It's all about volume or feel or whatever else. And it's just total bullshit because you are the sum of your entire life experiences. Whether you see that or not, whether you just see the last year of what you've done and say that is the thing. You are the result of your entire breadth of your experiences. So strength is absolutely not useless at all. Like bottom line, if you're training in a progressive manner, which you should be, progressive overload is the outcome, but also the driver of muscle growth. Like, yeah, of course, you can add reps, you can shorten rest periods, but in the end, you've got to add weight to the bar at certain points. So strength is extremely important. I think my general philosophy can be summed up in one sentence, which I say all the time on my channel. A lot of my viewers will know this. Progressive poundages in good standardized form in a bodybuilding rep range. If that, for me, sums up some of the basic tenets and the overriding principles of bodybuilding, to go back to our initial talk an hour ago when we started talking, whatever you're listening to, whatever you're doing, as long as you're satisfying that sentence, you're moving forward. This is why, like, I don't really get that involved in some of the biomechanics stuff because I think it's great, but as long as it allows you to accomplish that. If you're not doing that, you're definitely not progressing. If you are doing that while also having great biomechanics, like we talked about, making sure as an advanced athlete you're stressing all the right areas, then you're going to grow even better. But that's so I would say it's strength is very important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think some people see some of my stuff, they hear me talk and like they think that like I don't push weight or weight's not important. But it's like if you can manage your shape, then you gotta progress the weight. Like I'm much more of a fan of progressing weight than rep periods, rep ranges, or rest
Mm.
periods for sure. And it's like you can do it with good form too. Like I've got me doing incline
Mm.
presses with 150s without going crazy and losing everything. So
Nice.
you just gotta like build up to it. And a lot of people when they do tighten up their form, they get a little weaker right away. So
Mm.
that can be kind of discouraging, but you can build up pretty close to where you were with a little bit more powerlifting style of stiffness with a little bit more bodybuilding style workouts, and it won't be that far off at all, I
Absolutely.
don't
Yeah,
think.
totally agree. Yeah.
Would you ever consider TRT as you're getting older? In 50s, 60s? That was what someone was asking.
Yeah. So, well, this is probably an exclusive for your channel. I've thought about it. because I think I'm definitely smaller than I was in 2018. I think my test levels have definitely come down a little bit. So I have broached the topic with my wife, and
Yeah.
I've said to her, when the time is right, it's possibly something I'll look at. Now, I don't think the time is right now. I haven't tested my testosterone. I don't know what it is, but I just feel, particularly after my recent diet that I did, I got pretty lean a few months ago. I felt recovery from that was very difficult, and also my
Yeah.
libido was absolutely tanked
I
by
was
the
about to
end.
ask you, yeah, once the dick stops working, that's when I would start for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, quick. So I've definitely considered it. But at the moment, while I'm definitely not recovering as well as I did when I was younger, I'm definitely not as big as I was. My quality of life is still okay. So my mood is still good, my energy is still good. I sleep well, I wake up, with energy. So as long as that's not being affected, then I don't see the reason for it. Because let's face it, I'm 44 years old. Like, why do I need to be, 190
Yeah.
pounds, 200 pounds? I don't need to. So I would say at the moment, no. But if ever there comes a point where my quality of life gets impacted, then I would consider it. But I mean, I'll say this: I've not had the. It's not for not having the accusations. I've definitely
Yeah.
had more than my fair
Sure.
share of accusations, and I'm like, doesn't make any sense. I mean, in my last cut phase, I ended at 165, so I don't know where those are
You
coming
got
from
abs and you're over 40, you're on juice, bro. It's
in the juice for
like,
that, yeah. So, but no, I mean, it just being completely transparent and open. It's definitely something that I've discussed with the wife, and when the time is right, it's a possibility. I'll look at it for sure. But for now, as long as my quality of life isn't affected, because I've got to be able to do my job. You know what it's like.
yeah.
It's You're busy, right? Entrepreneur, all that kind of stuff. As long as I can do that, I'm good. And so far, touch wood, I'm good.
Do you think there's any of your audience that will be like upset or care at all?
No, I think I mostly speak to naturals, to be honest. I do have some enhanced clients.
No, I mean, do you think
Yeah.
any of the naturals will care if you hop on TRT at all?
Oh, I see. I don't know. I've never really thought about that.
I mean, probably
This is
not
why
too
I've not
much, maybe a
discussed.
couple, but yeah.
I mean, this is why I've not discussed it in public. So I don't even know if I should have said that. But I mean, I'm just being open.
Yeah.
I think they'll understand if I broach it in the right way. I think they'll understand.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, you're over 40. I mean, especially if you wait a couple years, like I think people, I don't think you'll have too many people. There'll be a couple weirdos, but
Yeah, but I mean, I will say, like, my brother's 50, and he hasn't considered it at all. So I can't see myself needing it for a while.
yeah,
I mean, like I say, I see it because I feel like I'm slower relative to where I was. But where I was at a pretty high level,
yeah,
you're, national ranked, European ranked, and like very competitive. So I feel it from that. But I think compared to my friends who are my age,
yeah, exactly.
I
Your peer
mean,
group.
geez, yeah, I mean, compared to my friends who are in the mid-30s, I feel great. So
Yeah,
at the moment, there's no pressure at all. I think it's something well in the future.
yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on hybrid training and how much can it possibly impede hypertrophy?
So what specifically, what sport? 'Cause I think some can work, some can't.
I think they're more just talking about like upping your cardio and trying to really log
Oh,
in.
sorry, yes, the question, yeah. Yeah, it's fine. I think if you work into it slowly. I will say when it comes to the more aggressive sports like boxing, MMA, the problem there isn't so much in the sport, it's the way it's taught sometimes. Like you go into a class as a beginner, they put you through the ringer because they're trying to justify their money. Like, hey, this guy paid us this amount, he signed up for 6 months, let's give him a good workout. And I don't think that's always the greatest way to go about it. Like I think if you want to break into it, you got to break into it slowly. Like if you're trying to get into jogging or running, you've got a couch to 5K kind of program. You're gonna break into that slowly. I don't think with some sports which are like MMA and boxing, from what I've seen, that's lacking. So it's not so much a problem with the sport, it's more a case of amalgamating the two. You may need to pull back on your lifting for a while. Like I did 4 years of MMA. I did Vale Tudo when I was at university,
Oh shit.
which was great, but I had to put the weightlifting on the
And that
back
was that
burner
was
because
back in the day. Was that before like UFC even? Yeah.
it was early days. So it was
Yeah.
2001 to
Yeah.
2005.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it was all through university. It was cool. It was dead good. And it was great too because I was coming from a powerlifting background. So it's very
Yeah.
difficult to throw a guy around who's quite strong. I mean, the beginners, my coach at the time could do what he
Yeah.
wanted
But
with me.
in
He could throw
powerlifting,
me
it's all
around.
about not getting moved. You can't turn it off. So you have that structure. Yeah.
Just muscle my way out. But yeah, so but the thing is that I had to really put the powerlifting on the back burner during that period of time, and just to do that. So I wasn't really intelligent enough or aware enough at the time to try and push, like balance things.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that's the biggest problem. So I think hybrid training is fine, but ultimately it's a case of balancing the two, and that's really where it's quite tricky because if you're enthusiastic about something, you want to go at it, and if the trainer is saying, "Here, let's go, let's do this," Let's throw those punches. Let's run that bag. I think you're going to get carried away quite quickly, from what I've seen.
Yeah, yeah. I love. Do you follow Alec at all? Alec Blennis?
Alec Bennis.
Blennis,
No.
I think it's the Blend. Yeah, he's great. I had him on the podcast. He is like he's got the
Okay.
world record in the Murph.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and
Right.
he's like an ultra marathon runner, and he also back lunges like 405. I think he's a great
Holy
example
shit.
of a hybrid trainer.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's great,
Yeah.
dude. You should
Wow.
check him out. He's a really intelligent guy.
Yeah, I
Um,
will. Yeah, I will.
cool. Just a couple more. What do you think about obstacle pushing or pulling, like sleds on lighter or medium kind of days that you program?
Not a huge fan, honestly. No, I'm not a huge fan. I think probably for the same reason with the hybrid training. I think if you're trying to get an effect out of it on your heart rate, there are better options. I think for most bodybuilders, you're already pounding your joints multiple times a week to the point where that's your limiting capacity. I think for most lifters, their joints and connective tissues are their limiting capacity, not the muscles. So you're adding a potentially chaotic element to that. And I know literally just last week, one of my friends, his wife tore a calf from
Ooh,
pushing a sled within the first week. So it's
damn.
one of those where I think as a lifter, you've got to be very careful. There's a reason why most lifters do their cardio on the treadmill or the step mill or the elliptical. Like, for one, they're not very athletic because it's bodybuilding is kind of like the other sport. It's not a particularly athletic sport. But two, because their joints are already beaten up, because that's the limiting factor for most people when it comes to volume. It's not the muscles. Muscles recover lightning fast, whether you're natural or enhanced. So I don't like it. I would prefer my guys to do more relaxed form of cardio. Again, the exception is if they come from a background of running and they love running, then I think it's a wise thing to be able to continue to have the capacity to run if you can already run. But if you're getting into a new endeavor and you just want to get your heart rate up for whatever reason, just get on a treadmill, do what the rest of us are doing, get your heart rate up to 140, call it a day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting talking about the joints and stuff. It's like I said, I always had a pretty good like rib cage position with pressing just because I felt like more pecs if I just had a little abs on. But
Mm,
I was pretty big arched on back moves and any kind of leg stuff. I was extremely hyperextended and I would get like the joints, the knees, the wrists, like nothing insane, but a little bit like, and it's like now that I'm just so focused on the shape and I know I go a little too far, not too far, but I go pretty extreme on one end, but that's just to kind of like bring me back to the middle a little bit because I spend so far the opposite way. But it's like now,
ah,
like I haven't felt a joint besides I made fun of somebody in a video and I hurt my elbow. But other than that, it's like my muscles feel like they've gotten hit by baseball bats for like I don't know if that's a good thing for like 3 days, but I feel no joint awareness at all now. When that was I think that is always the main thing that's going to be the limiting factor for
mm,
everybody because it tends to like this is one of the questions we went over on the round table is like people start getting joint pain and then they start trying to manage it most often through like load management only, which that
mm,
definitely needs to be a strategy. But unless you're
mm,
looking at some underlying, movement flaw or something else, there's probably
mm.
something that needs to be addressed along with it. And I think that's a
No,
pretty common
absolutely, yeah.
mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, exercise selection, form, how you move, these are all things that can affect things for sure.
The
So what
variability.
you're saying is, so what you're saying is your body position has helped you in other areas too, like in more athletic stuff, like cardio and things.
Oh, no, I mean, I haven't done so. I would say it's like I'm kind of doing the opposite of athleticism in a sense. Like I'm taking like the connective tissue and the massive force producing component like away. I'm just putting everything on the muscles. Whereas like if I was an athlete, there's so much more connective tissue absorbing
Mm,
and producing force and so much more orientation because that's necessary. So I don't do much things athletic at all. I don't know if I'm better athletically or worse. I know I run better. I mean, I used to not be able to run because my left knee would hurt, but now
no.
that my hips are in a good position, I can run all day with no pain. But yeah, I'm not I used to be very athletic. I used to do a lot of crazy Ninja Warrior shit before I
Oh,
started
really?
competing. Yeah, and I still have some of that in me. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
if you look at my old school Instagram from way back in the day, I think there's some shit on there.
Oh, very cool. Love it. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then we had another question which I thought was pretty good. This was from a guy who I think was a little older. He was asking if training to failure with low volume can be just as fatiguing as high volume, not quite at failure for someone older.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you and I have touched on this conversation as we've been speaking, you with your older clients and me as well, talking about volume. I think you can get to a point where you're getting super low in the volume and it's almost like a consistent peaking cycle. And I think recently we've had quite an upsurgence in people doing very low volumes and very stable exercises with very low reps getting very strong. And I think there is an immediate gratification of that. What I would say is, generally speaking, that's probably coming off the back of fairly high volumes. So what they're seeing is a peaking effect. And again, like I say, you are not just the result of your training over the last year or the last 6 months. You are a result of your entire lifetime of training. So I think there definitely is an issue with going too low in the volume, too low in the reps, for sure, and too close to failure. I think that can potentially lead to you beating up your joints. And this is why I come back to my recommendations. Very moderate, 8 to 16 sets per body part per week. And that's right in the middle. It's not super high, it's not super low. And that's where your training should be for the majority of the year. And if you're going on the higher end, stay away from failure, do more of an RIR approach. Make sure your form is dialed in, like you and I have both talked about. Make sure you're standardized for good effective lifting, which targets the muscles that you're trying to train. But yeah, I think from what I see, and this is some of the guys in the UK are very guilty of this as well. When they're lifting, they're not targeting the muscle. They're literally just hanging on for dear life. Now, I won't name people, but there's some fairly big characters in the UK. When you see them lift, it's impressive as, but my God, it's not bodybuilding anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's powerlifting with various exercises like RDLs and stiff legs and chest press machines. And I don't think that's the right method for building muscle. I think if you're a very robust individual with thick joints, then great. But that is going to create some problems for the majority of people. I mean, the majority of people where this is popular is a very younger demographic, like TikTok generation. They love all this like 3 to 6 reps kind of routine with very low volume, and I think that's fine if you're that age because I could get away with some dumb shit when I was younger too. But ultimately, when you're younger, when you're in your 20s, it's a weird thing, Jonathan. Like when you're in your 20s, you think what you're doing represents life. What you don't realize is a lot of what you've done is just because you can get away with it from youth. You
Yeah.
can't see or past that because you think, well, not you, sorry, but they think their 20s represent their life. Whereas actually you've got your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and that's a much more accurate representation of what you know. The amount of guys who've come to me at 30 goes, Faz, my training doesn't work anymore. It's like, yeah, it's because you never knew what you were doing in the first place. Like you got away with it because you were young. So yeah, I do get a bit frustrated with that. I mean, I try not to because I don't consume that much other content. But that's the little bits that I've seen have generally come from very young or inexperienced lifters, and they are going to see some benefits initially, probably just from a peaking effect. Or they might get less aches and pains, which is also very good. But I think long term, they're probably going to come back to the middle, which are my recommendations.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think so as well. And one thing you mentioned too is like how as you get more advanced, the volume kind of dips
Mm.
down. I think that is like super true. Like I was working with Justin Compton and he was programming like
Yeah.
so much volume for me, and it's like, yeah, there was a time where I could handle that, but like now I'm just so effective, it just beats the shit out of me, like for way too bad. I had one more question I wanted to ask you real quick. So I was curious, have you when we were talking about the sleds, it just made me think of this. I don't know why it brought to my mind, but have you ever heard of Dr. Squat, like Fred Hatfield?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, have you ever seen his ABCs program?
Oh, you'll have to remind me. It's probably an article I read back in the day.
So it was so
I remember
interesting. It's
I remember his CAT, compensatory acceleration training.
Okay, I'm not sure that I mean I loved Dr. Squad. He was the man.
Yeah.
He had this ABC training program where it was like different workouts in A, B, and C. The A was really like recovery workouts essentially. The B was your bread and butter bodybuilding style workouts, and then the C was what he called like holistic sets, where it was just like super high volume, beat the shit out of yourself, actually do some slow twitch muscle fiber training, which was kind of an
Mm.
interesting concept. And then one of the things I used to do when I ran his program with the sled was so he it was a fucking complicated program. It would be like you had a variable rate of recovery based off of what the muscle group was and the intensity you use, right? So if you do biceps with like a workout, you could pretty much work out the next day or the day after. Where if you do like a leg workout with a C workout, it's like a 6 or 7 day recovery. So one of the things that I used to do is I would do like the leg day, like a moderate day, and then like 2 or 3 days later on the light day, we would want to like limit muscle damaging. So that's when I would actually use the sled a little bit because kind of taking away
Ah.
the eccentric. Like that was something that I kind of thought was cool. But in general, the only other way I use it is for like mobility purposes and stuff like that. I think like if you're trying to do it for cardio, you're probably better just not doing something super weight bearing. So I definitely agree
See,
with
I
that.
like that. And what you said there makes a lot more sense. I think because it's part of a program and it's in place of something else. Where I think I disagree with it is if it's done on an off day in addition to what you're doing prior, as a form of cardio. I just think they're better options. But what you've just said there, that actually makes a lot more sense.
That was a fun program. It really, I mean, you only run it for like a month and then you got to do something easier, and it's like
Mhm.
not something I'd ever give to a client, but definitely my favorite thing I think I've ever run. I'll probably do it again soon. So,
Mhm.
before I let you go, I was just curious, who are your main like influences, like as far as in the industry or people that you really like right now that are putting out good content?
So I think, oof, yeah, you know what? It's difficult. I'll be honest, I don't follow a lot of other people's content. I think because it's a conscious decision, right? Because I think I'm I'm just as vulnerable to being influenced by other people's training, advice, and views as anybody else. I'm just human, and so I purposely try not to be aware of what is going on in the industry because if I do that, I think it has a negative effect on my own coaching. Because again, I'm just human. I'm not, I can't deprogram myself if I've listened to something and it can have an effect on me. So to get away from that, I try to just mostly consume my own content. Every now and again, I'll throw a comment into like a friend's video to show them sport. And I have a number of guys in the industry that I talk to on a regular basis, like behind the scenes, and they're all great guys. But so generally speaking, I try not to. I think if we're looking at the overall breadth of my last 26 years, a big influence and I'm glad he's making videos again, is Lyle McDonald.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as nutrition goes, I think he's the absolute OG.
Did
I
you ever do the
remember really good.
protein sparing modified fast back in the
Yeah,
day?
man, the
Yeah,
PSMF.
yeah,
I've got a video about that coming out soon, actually. PSMF, I ran probably the first time in about 2007. I think
yeah.
he's fantastic. On nutrition, I think Brad Pilon is excellent.
Oh man,
Um,
I haven't heard that name in a long time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've
OG
never heard
Brad.
anyone else talk about. I used to do the fast that he did for quite a while.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I like him. I just love his general vibe. I think he got involved in some other stuff recently, like the Adonis stuff, but I don't really know what that is. But just generally, his fasting stuff was the first exposure to fasting that I ever had was one 24-hour fast. I loved it. And after that was, of course, Martin Birkin, but I was mostly interested in that. So for nutrition wise, I think Lyle and Brad Pilon. Training wise, honestly, there's been so much. But I will say, although he's not been an influence in the past, he is now the guy who most closely resembles my training views is probably Lyle McDonald.
Yeah,
So I would say that's because again, because we're both quite moderate,
yeah.
you know. So I like his stuff. I think whenever I listen to him talk, I find myself nodding my head quite a lot. It's a lot of the stuff which I've discovered by focusing on my clients. So a lot of what I do in terms of my views has come from clients. It was actually quite an interesting thing. 2021, when I first got on YouTube and I released my first ebook, some guy messaged me and he said, why are your volume recommendations like that in the book? They don't match the current scientific recommendations. And I was just floored. I didn't know what to say because I was new to the whole YouTube thing. And I just replied back, well, that's what I did and it worked. Like, what do you, such a crazy thing. Well, I said it was 2006. That's what I did. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And if I, obviously now I'm a bit more familiar with the weight that people put on scientific studies as evidence, and that makes more sense now. But it just wasn't something that I considered in 2006,
Yeah.
like or even in 2021. Like if I release a book, it has to match the volume recommendations. It's just crazy,
Right.
Or so this is why I don't like to focus on what other people are doing. I focus just mostly on myself. And I think that's the best because I don't want to be influenced by other people. I do because of my work and my YouTube. I read a lot of studies. So I do that because my guys will know that I've debunked a lot of things and sort of called into question a lot of current studies on hypertrophy. And so to do that, I have to read things. So recently, I've read a lot of work by Samuel Buckner, who I think is very good. He's been very critical of some of the more popular researchers in our field who are putting out some pretty
Oh
wild.
yeah, I know who you're talking about. He got recommended to me. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Good. If you can get him on a podcast, he's a very intelligent mind. His wife or girlfriend is Holly Baxter. She has a YouTube channel as well. Very sharp people. But I like him because he's not afraid to call out some bad research, which I think this industry sorely needs.
Yeah.
Because when I see something, I mean, I don't think everything needs to match my views. Like if I see a scientific study which goes against my views, then great. But let's face it, we're talking about lifting here. We're not talking about like it's not cancer research. We're not revolutionaries. It's lifting. We know what we're doing. So if something comes out which is drastically different to what people have done over the last 100 years, or have come to the conclusion of over the last 100 years, I think it should raise some eyebrows. And if you look deeper into the research of the modern day, it's not the most robust field. Let's just put it like that. So I think it deserves to be heavily critiqued, and I think critique is part of science.
Yeah.
From what Samuel's seen, his critiques have been shut down. He's been blocked and banned on certain people's Instagram accounts, on YouTube accounts, so he can't engage in debate. And I think that's it's a tell, when people do that.
I gotta check it out because, like I said, I used to tutor stats. I got really deep into stats in college, and it's like you can fucking manipulate the shit out of those, like, and make it to say like whatever you really want, like without it being like much of a difference in the least
Yeah,
bit.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the actual size increase might be minuscule, but if it has an Instagram heading where it says 150% more growth, you
Yeah,
think that's a lot. Actually, it's nothing, you know.
exactly.
150% of zilch is still zilch.
Right.
So
Yeah, awesome. Is there anything else you want to put out there? Anything you want to go over before I let you go, brother? I really appreciate your time.
no, you know what? I just want to say thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for having me on your channel. I really appreciate it. And I will look into your content more now that we know each
Of
other.
course.
So I
Yeah.
really appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the stuff that you put out there. The no BS. You're not doing sensational shit. You're not like trying to like clickbait or do anything. You're just letting, the real you be organic, and that's going to be way more success long term than any other bullshit.
Yeah, I hope so. It's nice to hear that people think highly of me on Reddit, so that's nice. Yeah, but yeah, no. If some people want to reach out to me, they can do so on my YouTube channel. I'm also on Instagram. I post client testimonials there every now and again and various reels. So yeah, and if you're interested in coaching, feel free to get in touch. Various consultation services. But yeah, just once again, thank you for having me on the channel. It's been a really nice talk.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. We'll have to do it again sometime. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it, brother.